Welcome to the Cornerstone Church podcast. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We are working our way still through the Pilgrim's Progress, and if you caught up last time, we were looking at the long conversation between Christian and faithful and talkative, who talked the good talk, but had no real work of grace in his heart and no understanding and no desire to really understand the true gospel. But it took them a while to see through his chat and his patter, but eventually they did. And so he's been left behind, as have many others now that they've met on the road. And now we're coming to this famous scene where Christian and faithful are going to make their way through Vanity Fair, and this is a place that they cannot avoid. So the road to the celestial city, which is heaven, passes directly through this town, and so if they want to get there, they have to go through here. And it's extraordinary, as we'll see in a minute. But after they carry on, don't they? So talkative goes, they carry on, and then they bump into an old friend.
Evangelist comes and basically tells them they have to go through Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
They're encouraged to see him, obviously, because he's the one that's pointed them on the right road, so they love him, and there's fellowship there. But he does say that you've got to go through Vanity Fair. He even says that the Son of God had to go through Vanity Fair, and he talks about when Jesus went through Vanity Fair, it was Beelzebub, the chief of demons. Satan himself was there, tempting him and trying to get him to taste the various vanities in Vanity Fair. So if he went through that, you've got to go through that. Yeah.
And evangelist, and that for him to say that is a sign that he's the real deal, because the other people that we've met along the road, either promise routes to heaven which won't involve suffering. So if you go off this way, or if you do this, you can avoid all these difficulties. Or they tend to be running back the other way, don't they? Because they've gone and they've met with some difficulty and they think this is just not worth it, and they go back. Whereas evangelist keeps saying, look, you've got to keep going, and that will involve difficulties. But
he even says at least one of you will die there.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of prophecy, that some Christians die in Vanity Fair. But it's funny because they come back to that, don't they? That prophecy is one of the things that helps them when they're going through suffering in Vanity Fair, and they look back to that word that sort of gives them courage, and also helps them realise they are on the right path, which is interesting, isn't it? So the false, everything will be easy for you, is going to be the thing that's going to cause you great difficulty if you're going through trouble. But if you've been promised trouble, and there's promised that some Christians will die in Vanity Fair, then but the promise is also big, isn't it? You will die, but you will get to the celestial city first, as it were, or quicker.
And the advantage of that is that you're spared the rest of the miseries of this world.
Yes.
So whereas yes, you may have a painful end, but you're gonna not have to experience all the other things that the other person will have to if they keep on going in this world.
So they come to Vanity Fair.
Yes, and
vanity. What?
Yeah,
because that's a strange word, isn't it? What's it mean?
Well, I think in the book of Ecclesiastes, when you have vanity, all is vanity. The Hebrew word that's translated vanity has to do with a kind of gust of wind or a puff of air, doesn't it? So I think it's both temporary and it's light in substance. So yeah, it's not here for long, and it's not weighty. So these are just like it's like the candy floss of the world.
Yeah.
It's light. It's got a superficial sweetness. it tastes okay for a second, but then it's dissolved and it's gone.
You
from
have
the
things
mouth
like
and
vanity
it's,
cases, don't you? Where it's all about makeup and putting stuff on. It's the superficial outside sort of
yeah.
glamour and glitz, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you call someone vain, you're saying you're into your appearance, but you don't care for the deeper things of character and.
So it's an emptiness, and a futility. Really, I think the breath, the mist. It's here 1 second, it's gone the next. It's so fleeting, and worthless. That's what he talks about here. All that is sold there and all who come there are worthless. So
that's a fairly good summary, isn't it? Yeah. So they go through the gates, is it, or the arch or something, or I can't remember. And what do they encounter straight away? Do they encounter any one thing, or is it just a general fear?
Well, it's probably worth saying. Sorry, that this has been set up by Beelzebub, the devil, and as you say, or as you said before, you have to go through this if you're going to get to the celestial city. But this is 5,000 years old. Yeah. In other words, what he's saying is, it's always been around,
it sells all sorts of things, right? Everything that you would possibly want: houses, land, trades, places, honours. It goes on and on and on.
Kingdoms, lusts, pleasures, delights, husbands, children, blood. Yeah, it's a strange thing to put in for Bunny, isn't it? It sells blood.
Bodies, souls, silver, gold, pearls, precious stones, much more.
Yeah, so it's like being on Amazon, isn't it?
It's just everything that you could possibly want. Any
marketplace.
You buy blood on Amazon?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It's any person's desire can be fulfilled in this sort of Vanity Fair. You want any amusement, we've got it here. You want any vices, you've got it here. You've got thefts, murders, adulteries, perjuries, and they're all a different shade of blood red colour.
Yeah.
So he's really painting this, and then he looks at the streets. So we've got everything that you want, and then you realise this is from all the kingdoms of the world.
Yes.
So it's really
that's what you've got here, the kingdom, because the streets are called roads.
Yeah.
Or roads or whatever. And there's German road and British road and all kinds of different kingdoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what Beelzebub took Jesus to, didn't he? And said Jesus could be ruler of all these worlds, of all this fun and stuff.
So it's interesting, isn't it? This because it's, as you say, it's sort of it's anything you want it to be, isn't it? So if you're into, just the I don't know, the more traditional throwaway sins, like if you wanted to throw your life away in drink and gambling and sex, and you can do that. But oddly enough, it says here, doesn't it, that but as in other fairs, some one commodity is as the chief of all the fair, so the ware of Rome, and her merchandise is greatly promoted in this fair.
Yes.
So presumably by that he means Roman Catholicism, does he? And so if you want to go the religious route, there's a place for you in Vanity Fair as well, isn't there? So you might, exactly. You can go for anything you want, providing it's not the genuine way.
And you probably, and that's why he's got these different rows. In one sense, you've got these different quarters, like you often have quarters in cities, don't you? And you could have the religious people there that may not like, the fun fair bit, but they're okay because they fit within the whole, city itself, the whole town itself. But they don't. The pilgrims don't.
Because they follow after the Prince of Princes, Jesus. So when Jesus was shown, as you say, by the devil, he refuses to buy its goods. He refuses to bow down. So Pilgrim writes, but he paid no attention to the merchandise, and therefore left the town without spending so much as 1 cent upon these vanities. And so, just as the Saviour went before them, they follow in the footsteps of him.
And as they walk in and they stand out.
Yeah, they're immediately recognised. Yeah. And John Bunyan says there's a great hubbub around them.
Yeah.
And there's two main reasons that people are interested in. Firstly, because they don't wear
Yeah.
the clothes that everybody else wears, so it becomes plain to the residents of Vanity Fair that they haven't bought their clothes where other people in the town have bought their clothes. They're wearing an armour, a kind of a spiritual suit. They're dressed differently, so they stand out. That's one thing, but also the way that they talk. So Bunyan says they speak the language of Canaan, which is the promised land in the Bible. So they speak God's language. They talk about God. They talk differently, and people are immediately picking that up. And as you do, I mean, here in London, it's very, very common to be on the train or the bus and hear 3, 4, 5 different languages, and it's why we love London. But there are parts of the UK where if you heard another language on the bus, you would be like, it would be weird. You'd stand out, and that's the sense here, isn't it? They don't look right, they don't speak right, and so people are. There's a kind of a bemused, like, who are these? Isn't there? To start with,
there is a third one though as well. They're not
yes.
interested in the merchandise that's for
right.
sale.
Yeah, right.
So they're not that taken in with the glitz and the glam.
Well, not even just that they're not taken in. They actively try not to look at it. So it's brilliant. They don't even try and browse. They put their fingers in their ears and they cry, "Turn away my eye from looking at vanity. I don't want to look at this stuff." And so they put their eyes up into things of heaven. They say, we only trade and we only work with the things of glory, not with the things of this world.
Yeah, well, they're challenged, aren't they? Because they're standing out.
Yeah.
They're looking different, speaking different, not buying the gear.
Yes, there's this one man here, beholding the carriage of the men, says to them, "What will ye buy?"
Yes.
I don't know how you imagine him. It's sort of like a Phil Mitchell sort of, "What will ye buy?"
Well,
But
in this original version here, it says, "Looking gravely upon him."
Yeah.
Christian answered, "We buy the truth."
Yes.
Now, as soon as you could say, if you say that today, almost that's going to get the same reaction, isn't it? We buy the truth. People are furious that you would claim to have the truth, aren't they?
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
Yeah.
They're taunting. And
It's sort of pompous, isn't it? We buy the truth. It's like, you can imagine them mocking it. It's a sort of sanctimonious individual who thinks they're better and different, and so they don't like that very much. And so what happens then?
Well, word gets to the governor of the fair.
Right.
He comes down to investigate, and they then put them under charge. Eventually.
And what's the essential nature of the charge? Is it that they're just...
It's rebellion, isn't it? And disturbance
well,
of the
they're
peace.
causing a disturbance, yeah.
It's disturbance of the peace. By what you're wearing and how you're speaking and not buying into it. I think that's so brilliant of Bunyan, because people don't just want you to say you can do what you like. I'm not doing it. They want you. You have to affirm them, don't you? I mean, you do. You genuinely get that. And particularly in our country today, if you're not affirming, if you don't have a rainbow flag in your window, if you're not affirming a lifestyle that you may not criticise, you're just getting on with life, then you're not affirming means that you are an enemy.
Yeah.
And that's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like... It reminds me a bit of when, during lockdown, when we had the Thursday night clapping for the NHS workers. You had to come out every night at 8 o'clock or whatever. And if your neighbour wasn't out, it was sort of like, everyone would be thinking, what are they doing? I know they're in. And there was this judging, wasn't there, that if you weren't out doing it as well, you were a wicked person, and you hated the NHS. And so you're right, it's not enough just to, and which is remarkable really, because we live in a culture which says, we want everyone to be free to believe their own truth and so forth, but if you don't join in with the general consensus of the world and use the language of the world and buy into it, then you're not welcome, actually.
Yes. You're free to you're free to believe any truth in the world as long as it's our truth.
Yeah.
So they don't buy this. They're then called. I mean, again, sorry, in the original here, they're bedlams and mad. So a bedlam is someone who went to the Bedlam hospital. In other words, they're a lunatic. So there's something seriously wrong with people like you if you're not buying into what we believe.
Yeah, but then the persecution really comes because they take them, they beat them, they're smearing dirt in their faces, and then they put them in a cage. But the remarkable thing is that in the face of those persecutions, the actions of the pilgrims is completely the opposite. Whereas they're being spoken ill of and where they're being laughed at, they actually are patient. They don't return abuse for abuse. They offer blessing and good words when given bad words. So just an amazing example of Christ-like living in the face of persecution. They do as Christ did, who didn't when he was abused didn't retaliate. And so they are similar to the Lord Jesus in the way that they respond to their persecutors.
And that enrages them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because they then go on to hang them up in irons and put them in a cage as an example for everybody in the fair to see. So it's a very humiliating punishment, isn't it? And yet, even in the face of that, they continue to offer blessing in the face of curse. And
they're not weak,
people are furious. You know.
No, so they absolutely do. They're strong in the sense that they're offering blessing in the face of persecution, which is the Christian way of life, isn't it? Which turns the whole power thing upside down and everything, because they're powerful in one sense, because they're in control of their own emotions, but they're not weak. They're not weak in saying what is right and wrong.
No, and in one sense, the Bunyan calls them meek. They have meekness. But meekness isn't weakness necessarily. No. It's that word of sort of strength under control.
Yeah.
And they could easily retaliate for like, but there is something quite powerful about restraining the natural desire to strike back. And I think they are strong and in such a different way. The patience and the forgiving nature that they show is otherworldly, really.
And that meekness and patience, as we've said, but it says here, this puts people into greater rage, in so much that they concluded death of these two men. I mean, they haven't even been put on trial yet, so there's no justice, no trial, nothing seriously happening. It's just an accusation, and then a man comes along, they're put in a cage. This is atrocious, isn't it?
Yeah. And they want them, as you say, they conclude that death is now the only option here, because for the abuse that they had done and for deluding the men of the fair, which is a really interesting charge, isn't it? That the way they've lived and the way they're speaking and their refusal to partake in the vanities is causing a confusion. People are being deluded by this, or
well, because what's happening is, although their actions and their speech and their clothes are enraging some, probably because it's exposing them, others see how they're treated and how they respond in that treatment, and they're thinking, oh, hold on, these blokes are actually innocent, and so it starts to turn some people in the fair to think, actually, are we living for the wrong things here?
Yeah.
And the religious leaders, it's interesting, like both with Jesus and with the Book of Acts.
Yeah.
You know, when great miracles are done, they often get together and they say, you know, that a great miracle has been done, we cannot deny. You know.
Yeah.
But we've got to forbid them from speaking in this name because many people are going after them.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what's going on here. They can't deny, as you say, the character witness of these people, but they've got to shut them down because people are getting interested, you know, and they can't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they grab them and take them, and they're going to now put them through a what would be called a kangaroo court. It's a sort of false court, isn't it? They have to pretend justice is going to be done.
Yeah.
I mean, that always gets me. And you get this everywhere, don't you? That you've got, like the Nazis.
Yeah.
They have to sort of protect. They have to write down, numbers and a Jewish name that they're going to kill someone. And it's a very odd thing, isn't it? And the communists, when they did that with the Stasi and all of that stuff, there's sort of a pretend of justice and writing things down, and you think, why don't you just kill them? What is that?
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because surely it's to say that what we're doing is right. So they're justifying themselves, and so by doing those things, they then say, actually, we've decided what's right. We're the judges.
So even in that evil,
Yeah.
even in that evil that they're doing, there's an imprint of God in them, isn't there? That they're denying by their evil.
Yeah.
But the idea that you want to pretend to have justice can only come from God, can't it? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that a modern example that is I think is somewhat similar is the way that the media have treated Russell Brand. I think at the moment. Because no one's defending him. Undoubtedly, there's some nasty stuff that has gone on, and people that have been abused and so on. But it's just interesting, isn't it, that before, so he hasn't even been found guilty. No. He hasn't even been legally charged with anything yet, and yet his material is all pulled down. He's completely cancelled. He can't make money off anything. It's all taken, and he's basically scrubbed, isn't he, already? Now, it may turn out that that's fair enough, but it's interesting the power of the media to bring forward Judgment Day, isn't it? And to rush a verdict upon somebody, when actually a foundational principle has always been, you need a fair trial. We need to have a proper charge. People are given the chance to defend themselves and to be heard, and And so I think that's we see that going on here, don't we? There's a concern for justice apparently, but really they're not gonna give it a fair go.
The names of the judges and the jury are just classic Bunyan, aren't they?
Yeah.
So the judge is called Lord Hategood. I mean, they're all men here. Yeah. But they would have been in Bunyan's day. You wouldn't have had a woman, I don't think, on a jury or a judge. But Hategood, yeah.
And then the three witnesses, or so-called witnesses, are called envy, superstition, and pickthank. And pickthank meant, what did it mean again?
It's wanting.
It's a flatterer.
Flattery.
Isn't it?
Yes.
It's wanting flattery.
Yeah.
Sort of picking out for them to be thanked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a sycophantic sort of character who will basically say whatever they need to say in the company that they're in to be sort of
patted on the back.
Yeah.
Sorry, who were they again? There was pickthank.
Envy and superstition.
I've got a copy of the book here with a little picture of superstition, and he's sort of looking very nervous. He's everything's a conspiracy. Yeah. So, okay. So then what? The charges are made. Is that right? These witnesses are giving.
That's right. They've got to swear their oath in before they do anything, because they're so concerned about justice, and then Envy's the first one to stand up and to bear witness against. Faithful, particularly, has been put on trial here, and he is saying that actually. The fact that the way he lives, the way he speaks, is calling to question the customs of the Vanity Fair.
Yeah, I mean, Envy's interesting as well, because one of his big problems is that these pilgrims seem to believe that Christianity and the customs of Vanity Fair are diametrically opposite and cannot be reconciled.
That's right.
So I mean, and that's a fascinating comment, isn't it? That. It's not that they're completely against Christianity. I mean, they are, but they don't want to believe that they are. They want to sort of believe that everyone is welcome here in Vanity Fair, and actually we don't need to be so exclusive. And you can be a Christian and live here and partake of all these delights. We've got loads of Christians living here, but the fact that the pilgrims, won't just walk the right way, they have to condemn what's going on around them as unfaithful. That is really what they hate.
Have to sort of bring Jesus in, or Christianity in, as if this is part of the flow of what they believe.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be going against Jesus, if you like, so they've got to make Jesus one of us.
Yeah, and it's one of the things you hear sometimes when you're talking to Muslims, when we've done so at the university and in other contexts. One of the things they'll say, if they don't know Islam very well, or if they're just trying to be friendly, they'll say, we believe in Jesus too.
Yeah.
We love Jesus. Jesus is one of our prophets. And they're sort of desperate to show that it's really the same thing, and that I'm actually almost a Muslim, really, if I would just see that, and then the Christian, and you from very soon after you're converted, you can't accept that. You have to sort of say, well, I know you've got a Jesus, but it's not the real Jesus, is it? Because Jesus said this, and you don't believe that, and you have to. And that's the bit, it's not that you believe in Jesus that's the problem, it's that you have to separate your Jesus from everything else,
Or the liberal way, isn't it, is to have a Jesus that wouldn't condemn us and wants us to know life and wants us to enjoy ourselves. And, they would you go that way, So then you get superstitions called in.
Yeah.
What's his big thing?
Well, superstition just starts brilliantly. My Lord, I am not friends with this man, nor do I have any desire to know him better. But his problem is that faithful is essentially saying that their religion is worthless, that they can't please God by the way they live, and actually, in the end, they're deserving of damnation.
Yeah,
which is offensive to him. And,
and then there's Pickfank, who you can tell he's a flatterer because the others say my lord, but he adds my lord and you gentlemen all. And then he goes on to say they have spoken contemptibly of the honourable friends whose names are, and so he wants to pretend to be speaking well of everybody. But
the honourable friends are worth just mentioning, because there's Lord Old Man. There's Lord Desire.
What's wrong with that?
Lord Old Man.
Oh, the old self.
The old self.
It doesn't mean age. I was suddenly thinking, and I was thinking, hold on, what's about?
And then
That's disrespectful.
Lord Carnal Delight. There's Lord Luxurious. There's Lord Desire of Vainglory. And my Lord Lechery. I mean, that's
my old Lord Lechery.
Oh yes, my old Lord Lechery. It has to be an old Lord Lechery. And then there's Sir Having Greed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just terrific, really. But he's as you say, he's Pickfank toward them, isn't he? He wants them all to be generous towards him, and I mean, they're awful, really.
Yeah, and this is what, again, the Pharisees, they go all of these different routes. So, and actually in the stoning of Stephen, it's quite interesting, in Acts, where how do they get him? They sort of recruit some false witnesses to say that Stephen has spoken ill of Moses. Which is exactly the thing here. He's saying, my Lord, these guys have spoken ill of your friends, the people you claim to love. So it's that sort of thing going on, isn't it? And so then,
the judge sort of...
He's heard enough, has he?
No, he allows Faithful to speak.
After calling him a few choice words, heretic and traitor and contemptible, good-for-nothing vagrant, but then he allows him to make a defence of himself, to which he does.
It says vile runagate here. Not renegade, but runagate.
I think that's the vagrant word, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But Faithful, this is why he's no pushover, is he?
No.
He answers truly. The accusations. He's not just going to lie down and allow the accusations, and he just says they're untrue. These are untrue. These are exaggerations and untrue. That's basically sort of how it goes, I think.
Whilst saying, look, I'm a follower of the gospel of Christ, really. So, look, in one sense, they're not wrong, but I'm just following the way of the Lord.
And it's good, isn't it? Because it's a very wise answer, because he takes the personal sting out of it. So he's basically saying, look, the only things I've spoken against are those which are flatly against the word of God.
Yeah.
That's what I will speak against. You're trying to make it, I've spoken against Lord Letchery and I've spoken against... I'm not really interested in speaking against any one particular person, but what is flatly against the word of God, that I will stand against.
Yes.
So he's very carefully navigated that, hasn't he?
But he is still a little bit in your face, because he says, I must still say that the prince of this town, with all the riotous crowd of low people in his attendants, which were named by Mr. Pickthank, so all your old Lord Letchery, are more fit for being in hell than in this town and country. And so the Lord have mercy upon me. So I'm going to answer honestly, but I will tell you what I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. And so that's what it says, doesn't it? In Jesus says that you'll be given power when you're under trial to be able to testify to me. And he does that in that way. So he's not. I think that's the thing. He's not a pushover. In fact, it's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
Given the circumstances.
And so then the matter is turned over to the jury. I've got a picture of them here as well, and I mean, honestly, if you were facing them in the court, you'd be pretty worried. They do not look like a very
it's great
It's
great as well, because the judge says, let me just remind you of 3 decrees, and he points to Pharaoh, to Nebuchadnezzar, to Darius, the great ones who wanted them to bow down to them, and wanted to worship their gods, and so they were fundamentally against God.
If you were faithful, you'd be thinking,
And the names of the jury members, again, they're all men, because they would have been in Bunyan's day, but it's Mr. Blind Man. And I mean, he says things like, I see clearly. I mean, it's just brilliant. Mr. No Good, Mr. Malice, Mr. Lovelust, Mr. Live Loose, Mr. Heady, Mr. High Mind, Mr. Enmity, Mr. Liar, Mr. Cruelty, Mr. Hate Light, and Mr. Implacable. Sorry, what did implacable mean again?
Well, impossible to placate, which means once they're set in their ways and they've made their mind up, you cannot gain their favour, you cannot change their mind, you cannot make them sort of warm towards you, they're against you, and that's it, and this lady's not for turning. It's that sort of thing.
So Blind Man sees clearly that he's a heretic, this man, so he's not just wrong, he's a heretic. Then Mr. No Good, says, take this fellow away from the earth. Mr. Malice is, I hate the very look of him. And so it goes through those...
Mr. Heady says, hang him. He's just caught up in the headiness of the moment.
Well, I love Mr. Live Loose as well, because I think he shows really the heart of them all. It's not, he wants him done away with as well, for he would always be condemning my lifestyle.
That's not really what we're talking about, mate, but thanks for that. That shows, exactly.
So
you've got to, and Mr. Implacable, if I were to be given the whole world, still I could not be reconciled to him. Therefore I say we deliver our verdict and find him guilty and deserving of death. So there's no grace here for Faithful from this jury.
No, and so they decide to kill Faithful, and it's it's pretty awful, isn't it?
But there's it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's no real higher justice than their sense of being dishonoured or being hit, isn't it? You've upset me. Therefore you must be wrong. So they've got nothing bigger than themselves in that sense to apply. And then what happens?
Well, they bring him out, and they lance his flesh with knives, and they tear chunks of skin off him. Really, they stone him with stones, stab him with swords, and then burn him to ashes at the stake. And thus Faithful came to his end. So it's they as well. So it implies this is it's like hyenas, isn't it? Of just all taking turns on a victim, and it's pretty. There's no kind of lethal injection. If we're going to kill him, let's at least make it as humane as we can. They want it to be as drawn out and as extended and as horrible as it can be.
Which is what Evangelist did say. This is going to be a nasty death. But the sentence is, he came to his earthly end. He's not finished. Is faithful.
There's a swing low, sweet chariot, isn't there?
Yeah. That's sort of waiting there for him. His carriage awaits. As soon as he's executed, he's taken the most direct route to the celestial gate. And then Christians released by the sovereign hand of the Lord, who's worked through obviously the evil men. He allows Christian to go, and as Christian goes, he says, "Well, faithful, you have faithfully professed unto your Lord, with whom you will be blessed. When faithless ones with all their worthless delights are crying out under their hellish plights, sing, faithful, sing, and let your name survive. For though they have killed you, yet you are alive." And so,
wonderful, isn't it?
Such a lovely end to the whole scene, really. That you may kill the body, but you will not actually kill the Christian.
Yeah.
And faithful goes on to live in the sort of presence of his Lord.
And again, it reminds me. I mean, I read it recently. That's why the stoning of Stephen. When it comes to his death, and they, he looks up and he sees the Son of Man, in heaven, and he prays, "Jesus, have mercy on them," and then he falls asleep. And it uses that phrase. Then he fell asleep. And that's what's happened to Faithful, isn't it? He's fallen asleep in the Lord. And it's just amazing how quickly it moves, really, isn't it? And it just started with them wanting to, keep their heads down, in a sense, and just walk through and get on with following the Lord, and just not wanting to buy the stuff. And then it snowballs, doesn't it? And, and so all of a sudden you've lost your life just for that, what was quite a sort of humble, head down sort of witness. If you won't give up on it, that's where it will take you.
That happens around the world, doesn't it? To many, many Christians. I just like as well that the idea that God is, He's the one in control, both of faithful and Christian.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that Christian was less faithful than faithful.
No.
But God had the plan to somehow allow him to be released. And faithful to be taken.
And it doesn't say much more about that, does it? I mean, that's quite interesting.
Well, we go on because I think you find one of Christian's companions is someone who's converted.
Yeah.
From this death, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's hopeful, isn't it? So, if I'm right, but we go on and there's been a conversion from this. Yeah. Which is in the blood of the martyrs, is the seed of the church, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, I
think so.
Enough for that one? Yeah, well, amazing. So Christian, we leave Christian at the end of this episode, and the Lord in his sovereignty has saved him from this fate, and has made a way for him to escape. And so we're going to pick up the story next time. You can go to cornerstonechurchkingston.org and listen to lots of other resources. And thanks again for tuning in.